everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Crime and Coffee Couple. My name's Allison.
And my name is Mike.
Hi, Mike.
Hey, Al. Long time no see.
I know. I haven't seen you in so long. It's been about 0 seconds.
Yeah, we're recording back-to-back episodes here. So, if you're a new Patreon and you're waiting for your name at the end of the show, we probably won't mention it at this show because we haven't had any new Patreons in the last, 4 minutes. So.
We will not mention you in this show, but we will in the next. So,
Yes.
Stay tuned for that.
Yes, exactly. How's it going for you?
It's going pretty good. How are you?
We're wearing the same clothes. So if you are a member of YouTube or ever look at YouTube, you should go over to YouTube right now and type in Crime and Coffee Couple and go subscribe to us just so we can kind of grow that channel a little bit. That'd be very, very much appreciated.
We would appreciate it for sure. And just realize that we are wearing the same clothes we wore in the previous video. We have, just no chance to change.
Right. Well, I guess hopefully you had a great St. Patrick's Day last week, listening to this at this time. What, corned beef and cabbage?
Yeah, we actually are going to make corned beef and cabbage for St. Patty's Day.
Fish and chips.
No, we're not doing fish and chips or bangers and mash.
No.
But we are doing corned beef and cabbage, which I've never made before.
No, and I mean, there's really nothing to cook. It's basically warming everything.
No, there's some searing and things.
Really?
Oh, yeah, you're searing the hell out of that.
I've never, my family isn't filled with fantastic cooks, but outside of our Lithuanian heritage, but I've always just kind of had it boiled. So
yeah, this is going to be good.
Oh, good. Okay.
And she recommends roasting the red potatoes because otherwise they get all mushy.
I mean, I guess we probably shouldn't talk about it because last week was St. Patrick's
That's okay.
Day. Okay.
That's all right. Next year, to give you inspiration.
Yeah, exactly. So what's been going on?
Well, we were just talking before this episode started about something that happened at a Little League game a week or so ago.
Yeah, so it's real quick. I'll let you tell the story, but just to kind of set the setting, it was getting to be a really close game, and it was a lot of back and forth. And we told our boys in the dugout, let's go, guys. Let's get your guys pumped up. Cheer your guys on, because as coaches, we can't say anything, but the more you cheer your guys on, the more it gets in their head. So get really loud, and it sounds kind of annoying to the other team. We didn't do any of those planned cheers, but just let's go, Billy.
It wasn't annoying at all. It was completely there were a ton of runs coming in. You guys were normally cheering. It was very appropriate.
Right. There was nobody was targeted or anything. It was just cheering on your own team.
So we had recently played this other team, and I will be honest with you, I thought they were downright obnoxious. They bring this huge sound system and pump this music. And trust me, I like music, but they use explicit songs. So this
Did you say explicit? Are you ending it with a D?
No, explicit.
Okay, because a D sounds different than a T. I just wanted to get that out there.
You've been pointing out things I say weird. You say, how do I say Range Rover?
Range Rover.
Range Rover.
Look at that person, but got a new Range Rover. It's a Range Rover.
Range Rover.
Why are you so stressing the Rover part? Range Rover, let Billy come over.
Maybe that's why. I did play a lot of Red Rover.
Yeah, I think that's how you say it. Red Rover, let
Allison come over. I used to love Red Rover.
Oh, I loved it too because I was bigger than the other kids. I would just absolutely
obliterate them.
I'd just hammer through their arms. They'd be crying, and I'd be like, hell yeah!
This is the kind of guy we're dealing with.
Doyle rules. That's what I would say.
So anyway, explicit songs. So they're talking about smoking weed. There's just not appropriate words being used, and there's some little kids at these games. So the music is pumping. It's very offensive to me that they're forcing everyone to listen to the music that they choose to play in between batters and such.
I think it's kind of fun because I would do it if our team, had a speaker, but whatever.
My mom was at the game. She's 73 years old. She some of the songs were screaming. It's just don't force your music on us. Anyway, so this woman is there and for the other team, and she is obnoxious, screaming constantly, saying to the pitcher, oh, strike him out. No offense, batter. Thinking she's all cute. And it's honey, you're not cute at all.
You're super annoying.
So I sat there rolling my eyes. My mom's cursing under her breath, yada, yada, yada. My daughter, who is very tolerant of people, our daughter, I should say, because she is yours too, I hope.
Thank you.
She's very tolerant and patient, unlike her mother. And she was even getting super irritated with this lady. So now our team's coming back, and the team is appropriately cheering for their teammates, and she starts screaming at our dugout, keep it down, be respectful, you're being disrespectful. And I was like,
right? To the pitcher?
No, to your guys' whole dugout.
Yeah, but she was saying we're being disrespectful to the pitcher.
To their pitcher, yes.
Because he's trying to pitch.
Yes, and it's like, I'm sorry, this is not golf, lady, you psychopath. So I had reached my limit at that point, and I had to call her out. I said, they're absolutely allowed to cheer. They're teenagers, and their team is coming back. They're allowed to cheer.
They're having fun. This is like what being a kid's all about.
And my sister jumped in because she was there, and she's like, yeah, we've been listening to you the entire game. And the lady gets up out of her chair and starts walking towards us in a threatening nature. And she's like, excuse me, what did you say? And my sister's like, do you need me to repeat it again to you, honey? Because I will.
I'm so glad she was there, because you wouldn't have said that. Or, you'd say something. I'm
sorry. I'm not at a freaking Little League game to get into a freaking brawl.
No.
I would have done nothing because it's so absurd.
Right.
It's like, lady, you have literally not stopped yelling. Like, one thing I said to my mom is, I wonder if her husband ever wants to just put like a rag soaked in ether or whatever that is on her face just to make her just fall asleep for a while, because as loud as she was, he was quiet.
That's what he said.
The man never made a peep because he can't get a damn word in edgewise with this woman.
Yeah.
So who knew a Little League game could potentially end in a brawl?
And then we talked about it in the dugout the next game, just today. And the coach brought it up. He's like, hey, I heard the things got a little testy last week. And I was like, yeah. Apparently, there was almost a fight. So. And
I'm not a confrontational person. I've never been in a fight in my life. But when somebody pushes me to the limit and now they're yelling at our dugout of 12 to 15-year-old boys to tell them to be quiet when their team is coming back, I'd reached my limit there.
Yeah, lady, you don't run things. Shut your mouth.
Shut your damn effing mouth.
And they're going to be our rivals basically the whole season. There's only 4 teams, so we play every team like pretty much every other week.
Yeah, I'm like, you need to warn me when we're playing that team again, because I will not put my chair anywhere near this lady.
I'm pretty sure Wednesday.
Ugh.
So we'll see.
Well, I'm not looking forward to that.
Yeah.
And on that note, would you like to jump into another tragic tale?
Absolutely.
I'm going to tell.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is a listener suggestion from Stacy. So thank you, Stacy, for this.
And really quick, we're starting to get tons of suggestions, and I've seen a couple people like kind of TO'd, if I will.
TO'd? Ticked off?
Ticked off. That's
okay. I usually hear PO'd.
Napoleon Dynamite.
Oh.
I'm really TO'd. So they're starting to get TO'd saying, hey, you haven't read our suggestion yet, but there are literally like, what would you say, 100 suggestions?
Oh, no, probably 200.
Okay.
Which I can't tell you how thankful I am that
please.
You guys would take the time to think about something and send it our way. And I promise you, I am not a mean or nasty person, even though I might get into a brawl at a Little League game. I'm not a mean person, and I would never intentionally ever hurt anybody.
Yeah.
So if we don't get to your case, there might be a reason for it, or it's just too many.
Yeah.
And that's a good problem to have.
Keep sending them over.
Keep sending them. We do appreciate these.
Go ahead.
So Stacy, thank you for the suggestion. And this is the murder of Miriam Illis. So we're going over to Williamsport, Pennsylvania, and this is a quaint and picturesque town that is best known for, do you know what?
What's the town?
Williamsport, Pennsylvania.
Oh, yeah, Little League World Series.
Yes, exactly. I did not know that. So the area is safe, and kind of weird that we talked about a Little League game.
Yeah, it is.
That was completely not planned at all.
No, I mean, I had no idea that this is coming up. I don't know about
no idea.
I don't know about any of these cases.
Mike doesn't know our cases, so it's just dawning on me that we were just talking about Little League.
Ask me next week, and I will have no idea what this case was.
No, he won't in 2 hours probably. So this area is very safe. It averages about 1 to 2 homicides annually. This makes it a good area to live, as well as to be a police officer.
And a good place for kids to play sports.
Exactly. So, however, there is one case that has just befuddled investigators in this sleepy town. 2 officers have spent years trying to figure out who murdered a woman that didn't appear to have an enemy in the world. So in 1991, Richard Illis met Miriam Zambie while working as a resident in St. Louis Medical Center. So he was going to be a doctor. Well, he was a doctor at this point. So he's, still in training as a doctor, and Miriam worked there as a perfusionist. So what this person does is they operate a heart/lung machine that artificially replaces a patient's heart and lung functions during surgery, usually a coronary artery bypass graft, which is another fancy word for open heart surgery.
Okay.
So he ended up going to school to be a heart surgeon. She's running the machine in the OR, and that's how they met. So the couple got married in 1991, and within a few years, they welcomed their son, this is Richie, into the family. So he was Richard Jr. They called him Richie. And this is when they relocated to Williamsport, where the couple worked side by side at the time. So Richard went on to become a heart surgeon, like I said, and, he was making good money. So they purchased this spectacular mansion that sat high on a hill. And Richard and Miriam were one of the city's most prominent couples. Richard recalls that the community truly embraced them as a family. He feels that he was compensated probably more than he was worth. Richard was respected as one of the best doctors in the area, and the Ellis family initially felt that their time in Williamsport was truly wonderful. They were, basically living the dream at this point in time.
Sounds like it.
Richard is doing the job he spent a lot of time in school doing. He's being compensated, beautifully, and
he's humble.
They're affording a beautiful life.
Mm-hmm.
So after Richie was born, Miriam made the decision to become a stay-at-home mom, and this is when Richie was 2, and she quit her job. She never looked back. She just adored her new role as a mother. And Richard said that Miriam was truly a fantastic mother. He could not have ever hoped for anyone better to care for their son. So Miriam kept herself busy with volunteering for her church as well as the symphony. She had a dynamic personality. She was someone who made friends easily wherever she went. Despite being one of the most wealthy people in the area, Miriam was super humble. She was down to earth. She was approachable. She didn't flash her cash. She never flaunted it. She had no issues driving her green van and shopping at the dollar store. So she sounds like my kind of lady.
Super cool.
So Miriam's friends indicated that they rarely saw Richard. He was very busy. When they did see him, their overall impression of him was not very positive. It was their belief that he was becoming increasingly distant as well as controlling. Richard had expectations that were unattainable. He always expected the house to be in perfect order. He expected dinner to be sitting on the table when he requested his time. He comes home, dinner's there. Friends felt that Miriam was miserable with the emotional distance that was growing between her and her husband.
So far, those don't seem crazy. I mean, she's a stay-at-home mom with 1 kid, and I'm sure she's allowed to have help, for people cleaning the house or something.
She's not the family housekeeper. She's a mother.
Well, stay-at-home. I mean, it depends. I'm not going to say.
Well, you're going to garner a lot of hate on this one.
Yeah, maybe, but I'd love to hear from some people. But I mean, you have to lay out the law, right? You'd be like, okay, here's the expectations, for each other, so it's not like, okay, you're coming home and, but I've never done it, so I have no idea, but you've got 12 hours in the day, and I'm sure she had a gigantic house and, a mansion, like you said, but let's, hire a housekeeper or something, right?
Well, there's also a respectful way to say oh gosh, when I come home at 7:00 at night, dinner would be wonderful. Would you be willing to make it? How can we make dinner happen?
Yeah, for sure. And I everything I've heard, it didn't sound like he was like, it better be right or I'm going to, beat you or anything.
That's the way it sounded to be.
Okay.
His expectations were not maybe being conveyed in a very respectful manner.
Got it. Yeah, you definitely got to be respectful.
So again, there's an emotional distance growing between the couple. In 1998, Miriam went on to hire a divorce attorney, despite the fact that it really wasn't something that she truly wanted at this point. I think she felt pushed to make this decision. So during this time, Miriam's friends say that she was also growing suspicious. It was her belief that Richard was having an affair based on what she was seeing, his actions. And both Miriam and her lawyer soon discovered that her suspicions were correct. Richard was having an extramarital affair with his assistant. This is Catherine Sawyer, who Miriam actually hired to work for them.
I was looking at Twitter the other day, and I found a lot of entrepreneurs, and they're like, in the business world, you have no idea how many assistants with huge boobs are responsible for horrible divorces. It's just don't put yourself into that situation. You're not saying it's, whatever.
So pretty girls shouldn't be hired for assistants. How
No.
about if you're married, don't look at your pretty assistant and cheat on her.
Oh, for sure. But if you're the kind of guy that can't control himself, then just, maybe, don't hire somebody for their looks is all I'm saying.
Yeah, well, sure. Certainly not. But if you're an amazing person and you just so happen to be beautiful, I think you should still be hired.
Of course.
So the relationship quickly became a scandal at Williamsport Hospital because everybody knew that Richard was married.
It's a small town. He's one of the most richest people there.
Despite the pain that Miriam was experiencing, Richard, on the other hand, looks back at this time of his life with fondness.
I remember it fondly.
Yeah.
I was cheating on my wife and treating her like absolute garbage.
I just shook my head while I was researching this part. He said, I had a pretty perfect life there for a little while. I had a girlfriend who I loved, and we had a great time. I had a beautiful son who was being taken care of by his mother, who was the best mother in the world. There's no doubt about that. Everyone will tell you that. And I had my freedom.
Wow.
The affair was the final crack in the marriage, and Miriam soon moved out with Richie, who was at the time 5 years old. Richard refused to leave the home, so it was Miriam's decision to just say, I'm out. It was late March of 1998 when she did make this decision. So her friends felt that she would have been willing to put in the work to rebuild a relationship, but it was Richard who had no interest in doing so. Richard comments on this by saying, I wasn't interested in the beginning, but as time went on, the thoughts did occur in my mind. You don't talk about them, of course, because your girlfriend that you're having a relationship with certainly isn't going to appreciate these thoughts.
Oh, sure. I understand that completely.
That's why you don't get into an affair. Okay, just don't.
Right.
So during March of 1998, at the time of their separation, of course, this is when Miriam's moving out, she also withdrew $300,000 from their joint account.
I do that every once in a while just to make sure.
I normally try to take out about $500,000 from ours.
Yeah, sometimes you need 3, sometimes 5. It's
Oodles of millions we have in there.
when we're going out to the store, it's like, you need 3 or 5, and it's 100,000.
I'm like, $3? I don't think you can take out only $3. And you're like, no, 300,000.
Right. No, obviously.
Yeah, we've never had that conversation. I've never seen that number in my account either.
No.
So in the meantime, many people that knew Richard and Miriam could attest to the fact that their divorce was extremely tumultuous. On many occasions, Richard could be overheard speaking of Miriam in a very disparaging way. One woman even heard him say, I wish that B were dead. My life would be a whole lot easier. Miriam had also spoken of a confrontation between herself and Richard when he got in her face and said that she could die. On another occasion, during a social gathering in late summer or early fall of 1998, Miriam spoke to a woman named Leslie Smith. Miriam told Leslie that if she were to get a dime of child support, Richard would kill her. If she got custody of Richie, he would also kill her.
Jeez.
And she said, Leslie was like, oh, no, everything will be fine. And she's like, no, I really mean this.
Yeah.
So on January 7th, there was a contentious court hearing between Richard and Miriam in regards to their finances. And 1 week later, Miriam was found murdered in her own home.
I mean, that's blatantly obvious. That's the first guy they're looking at. It's always the husband you're looking into first, or ex-husband, as it were.
Not yet. The divorce wasn't finalized.
Right. And it's like, this guy's had a lot of things to say, so I can't wait to hear how open and shut this one is, hopefully.
So that's January 7th that they're having this court hearing. And now we're moving on to Friday night, January 15th, 1999. Miriam was home and she spoke with both of her sisters, Romaine and Sue. And Romaine said that Miriam was pleased that Richard's girlfriend was not going to be around for a few days. It was Miriam's hope that the distance would be just the thing for Richard to realize that the relationship with Catherine wasn't what he wanted after all. Maybe, possibly, he would see the light, he would return to his family. Because at this point in time, it sounds like had he made that choice, Miriam would have worked to repair the relationship to hope to save it for their family.
Yeah.
So during their conversation, Miriam mentioned that Richie was not home. He had just left with Richard at 5 p.m. for a weekend visit with Richard's sister, who lived 3 hours south of Williamsport. So when Miriam failed to show up, now moving on to Sunday. So this is when, her sisters are talking to her on that Friday. Now it's Sunday, and she didn't show up for Sunday school, on January 17th. She was always reliable. It wasn't like her to just not show up. So her neighbors were immediately concerned. They came over, they knocked on the door, rang the doorbell. She did not answer. So they moved on to some windows. They looked through a kitchen window and they were absolutely horrified by what they saw. And this, of course, prompted them to call the police. And the police gained entrance into the house. They had to kick down a door. And that's when they discovered Miriam lying face down on the kitchen floor with a cordless phone laying near her body. It was laying between her head and her shoulder. There was glass on the kitchen counter and a bullet hole was on the kitchen window, in the kitchen window, I should say. Miriam had been shot once in the back. And soon after, Richard is arriving to drop Richie off because he's coming back from the weekend away. So, of course, police officers are stopping him, and they came out to inform Richard that his wife had been killed. And according to Richard, he immediately asked the officers how she had been killed, which was when he discovered that she had been shot. However, that's not how the police officers remember their initial conversation with Richard. According to police, Richard's first question was, or at least one of Richard's first questions was, what evidence was found?
Man, for such a smart guy, it's just like, okay, let's pretend, I'm going to kill somebody and I'm pretending that I'm going to come up to the thing or that I paid to have them killed. It's like when I come up, the cops are going to be like, sir, there's somebody you love is killed. I'd be like, oh my God. Are you kidding?
What happened?
Are you joking?
What
like where?
happened?
What can I do? Or can we, save them? Or can we call an ambulance? They're like, no. Like that's like those are the things you would say. You wouldn't say any evidence to support how it was done.
Yeah, that's not a normal question. And
maybe eventually
they may have been going through a terrible divorce. He definitely respected Miriam as a mother. He said it freely that she was an amazing, fantastic mother. She is the mother of his 5-year-old child. That in itself should make you devastated. And it wasn't a typical question. So police right away were like,
Do you have any evidence?
So the autopsy showed that the bullet entered Miriam's upper back. It went into her chest and it basically destroyed multiple vital organs. The extent of, the damage that they saw proved that she would have died within seconds to minutes. So at the time, police were tasked with combing through the evidence. And really at that point, they may not have given that much thought to Richard's question at the time. They found a lot of evidence. They found a cigarette butt behind the house, as well as what appeared to be a homemade silencer, as well as footprints from a size 14 Reebok basketball shoe. Okay. So investigators first theorized that the murderer snuck along the drainage ditch in order to enter the property through the back. They stopped at the area where the cigarette butt was found, about 70 feet from the house, and the killer fired their gun through the only window of the house that had the blinds open. The killer then fled the scene, leaving the silencer behind. Footprints were very easy to see because there was snow on the ground, deep snow, and it showed that the killer stopped by a small tree where they would have had the perfect view through this window that had the blinds open. And you know what got me as like an eerie part of this case? I mean, the whole thing it just sucks. But had she closed those blinds, and God knows I'm not blaming Miriam, but like such a small little thing that you would never have thought of could have saved her life that night.
That's just exactly what I was thinking. Just
so freaking tragic to think of.
Because they wouldn't have a good shot.
No, they wouldn't have known she was standing there.
They probably would have got her at some other point.
At some other point, 100%. Just one of those little things that just like, oh gosh, I just hate this. So again, the footprints are very easy to follow because of the snow. So again, they're stopping by a small tree. They would have had the perfect view through the kitchen window where Miriam just happened to be standing. This was about 73 feet away. And based on the footprints, it could be determined that the shooter was right-handed. The track started and ended from the road and proved that only one person had been involved. Police went back to the clue of the cordless phone because we know it was found on the ground between Miriam's like head and neck or shoulder, which would make you think what?
That she was on the phone.
Yes. So, of course, they're going to look at this. And they discovered that she had been in the middle of a conversation with a friend who lived in Montana when she was murdered.
Oh, my God.
Which is a huge thing because oftentimes it's trying to figure out what the time of death was. And you have to think that we only know that her sisters and whoever talked to her on the phone on Friday night, and then she was discovered on Sunday. So they would have only had like a vague time frame in that weekend. But now because of this phone call, they can tell you her exact time of death.
Yeah.
Which is helpful as well as eerie and sad to even think about. So again, she's talking with her friend from Montana, and her friend was very confused when Miriam suddenly stopped speaking at exactly 10:37 p.m., according to the phone records. Miriam's friend Mary had called her at 10:10 p.m. Eastern Time. The two spoke for about 25 minutes. Suddenly, Mary heard a background noise. It sounded like a dish or glass breaking. We do know that glass did break when the bullet went through the kitchen window.
Right.
She then heard Miriam say, "Oh my God," followed by loud moaning. Mary asked Miriam if she was okay, but she got no response. It was Mary's thought that the sounds she was hearing were caused from a third party breaking into the line on the phone call, because that is something that would sometimes happen. Like,
When?
my mom tells me this all the time.
Well, like in the 50s, yeah.
So I don't
was
know if
party
that was
lines.
still party lines.
Yeah, when this happened?
1999.
Yeah, that didn't happen at this time.
Well, that's what Mary thought.
Okay.
So she thought a third party was breaking into their phone call, and Miriam hung up. I'm sorry, Mary hung up, and she immediately tried to call Miriam back, and she was met with a busy signal. She assumed that the lines had gone down due to bad weather at that point. You don't ever think that the person you're talking to on the phone just got shot.
Oh, maybe they got shot while we're on the phone together.
So Mary called Miriam back the next day. She got an answering machine. She left her a message. So without this phone call, investigators would not have been able to determine Miriam's exact time of death. That really proved to be one of their best clues that they found.
Yeah, because then you can, I mean, I don't know about surveillance at that time. That was kind of a while back.
Right, but at least pinpointing where people were at that time.
Yeah.
So it is, likely that the killer had been completely unaware of the fact that Miriam had even been on the phone when they made that shot, which ended up being a terrible error on their part, I should say. So police now knew exactly when the killer had fired their deadly shot, but now it was time to figure out who the killer was.
Yep.
So Richard realized that he was a suspect immediately. He said he had a solid alibi for the weekend. He also said that he had no motive to murder Miriam. It's like, sir?
He's like, I've got a solid alibi and I have no motive whatsoever.
Sir, 1 week before, you were having a terrible meeting at the court to discuss how you're going to divide up assets.
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of a motive,
Yeah.
but okay.
Sure.
So obviously this idea was something that investigators absolutely did not agree with, since money would have been an extremely strong motive.
And not to mention, most of those police officers, while maybe not experiencing that directly, they've heard of many situations like this.
Right. So the couple had yet to begin fully dividing the property, but already by this time, a judge had ordered Richard to pay Miriam $13,000 a month. This was about $5,500 in child support, as well as $7,800 in spousal support. That's a motive.
Yeah.
And again, that's even before they got into the nitty-gritty of the property.
Right.
So Richard claimed that this amount of money, it was no big deal. There was plenty more to go around. In addition to facing financial losses, Richard was also at risk for potentially losing custody of his son. And we do remember that Miriam made a comment to her friend that if Richard got, if she got custody of Richie, that'd be the end of it for her. So that was definitely something that he would have not been happy with.
Yeah.
So police knew that as a renowned surgeon, Richard was used to having control in his life. And this time he had lost control of Miriam as well as his finances.
Somebody with a lot of money, somebody that's a top surgeon, they're used to telling everybody what to do. And especially doctors, a lot of people are like afraid of doctors and treat them like God sometimes.
I have to tell you, I work with a crap ton of doctors, and 99% of them are fantastic human beings.
Oh. Okay.
So Richard,
No, I'm not saying they're bad people.
no,
It's
not
just,
bad people, but not like these
they have to
pompous
make-
a-holes.
No, they have to make big decisions. So
Of course.
it's all on them, and they're the one taking the risks. So,
Right.
Yeah.
Richard told police that he and Richie had been on the road at the time that Miriam was murdered. Investigators videotaped and timed the route that Richard said he had taken in both good and bad weather conditions, and the numbers just didn't seem to add up. Richard stopped at a McDonald's 35 miles away from the crime scene. Witnesses confirmed seeing him there. They just couldn't remember exactly what time they saw him. They remember seeing Richie and being like, oh, he's cute. So they do confirm that he had gone to that McDonald's. Richard planned to drive to his sister's house that night, but he said that due to snowy conditions, they stayed at the Hampton Inn on Route 283. They arrived at the hotel at 1 a.m. He then stayed at his sister's house on Saturday night. They went to his father's home on Sunday morning before he headed home with Richie. So the one person who may have known the exact truth was 5-year-old Richie, because he had been with his father that evening. But he wasn't interviewed for 2 years because Richard insisted that Richie had a fear of police. When police did speak with Richie, Richard insisted that a child psychologist be present, and Richie provided very little information.
I mean, he's 5 years old.
Yeah, he's young. He's probably in kindergarten at the time.
Yeah.
So one investigator theorized that it was very possible that perhaps Richard, being a physician who had easy access to narcotics as well as sedatives, could have potentially medicated his son to sleep as he circled back to Miriam's house to to shoot her.
Wow. Or, I mean, kids just sleep, in the car. Too,
Right,
so
possibly.
Who knows?
So this could not be proven. This was only speculation as the evidence was lacking.
Yeah, that's a big jump, but at the same time, anybody willing to kill their wife is capable of anything.
So other than the silencer, the cigarette butt, and the 3 hairs that were found in the silencer, there was little else. We do know the time of death because of the phone call, but beyond that, there was little else.
I mean, that sounds like a good amount. Like, does the hair match Richard's? Then I think you got like a case.
So all those items had been sent out for DNA analysis. One of the earliest leads came from Miriam herself, who had made a video inventory of the household possessions in anticipation for the divorce.
Okay.
So police took note of Richard's workshop, which contained drill presses, saws, grinding, and woodworking tools, that could have easily, made that homemade silencer that they found discarded in the snow. Richard admitted that he 100% could have made that silencer, but had he made it, it would have been far better than the amateurish silencer that police found. After police obtained a search warrant of the 2 homes as well as the cabin that Richard owned, they found traces of material in his workshop to make even an amateurish silencer. So he definitely had the means to do so. On his nightstand, they also found a book, and this book was titled, They Wrote Their Own Sentences, the FBI Handwriting Analysis Book. They thought that this was a very strange book choice for a doctor, a surgeon.
Sure.
Like, why would this be an interest of yours?
At least it wasn't like how to kill your wife and how to make a silencer.
Well, we'll come across some different things, but
Okay.
the case took an even stranger turn then when anonymous letters began to arrive.
Ooh.
So the first letter was sent to Richard's attorney and claimed that this person, whoever wrote the letter, is the one that had killed Miriam, not Richard. They had done so because Miriam was a racist. That's what the letter said.
All right.
And the letter was signed Soldier of God, Soldier of Equality, and Soldier of Death. And of course, Miriam's friends came forward and they said, absolutely not. Miriam was not a racist. There's nothing true in that statement to disparage her name after she had been terribly murdered.
Yeah.
So investigators found that the letter was very suspicious, and they felt that the timing was just very coincidental. It had been postmarked 4 days after Richard found out what police had taken from his home. The letter was also written just as the book found on the nightstand had suggested.
Oh.
This book would suggest that you would write in pencil because unlike ink, pencil cannot be tracked. They also suggested that you would write...
What do you mean tracked?
I don't know. Like, I'm not entirely sure what that means.
Like find out where the ink came from or something like that?
I'm not sure. I haven't read that book.
Or maybe like how hard you press. I don't know. Okay.
Maybe. Either way, I'm not a criminal, so it's not a book I need.
I understand.
It was also written in block printing, which can't be tied to a person's other writing because obviously they would send it for analysis to see if it could match. So the print
Block
came...
like bubble?
That's what I imagined.
Okay.
Either that or just like completely different type of block prints.
Oh, like right in the straight edges of everything. Yeah.
Exactly. So that you couldn't tie it to Richard's actual writing.
Huh.
But it's just uncanny that they found this book on the nightstand and all of a sudden letters are coming in with tips from this book taken from. So 4 months after the murder, another letter arrived. Now it's May of 1999, and at this time the writer talked about themselves. and the way they described themselves fit the exact description of Richard's partner, Dr. Zama. However, Dr. Zama had a rock-solid alibi. He had also been very good friends with Miriam. He had no motive to murder her whatsoever. So clearly these letters are being sent to detract attention from Richard. So it was the police's belief that the writer was someone whose goal was to methodically leave false clues. One of the letters arrived with a hair blatantly stuck to the flap of the envelope. Unless you are a bumbling fool, you are going to wear a shower cap and put gloves on and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Hey, literally all of these cases have something where they screwed up.
But this letter is smack dab on the adhesive of the flap of the envelope.
It's almost like they taped it there, like, whoopsies.
Exactly. Yeah. And police obviously believe that it had just simply been placed there. Both the stamp and the envelope had not been licked. It had just been wetted with something. Armed with warrants, police were able to take a sample of Richard's DNA. It did not match any of the hair from the envelope, the silencer, or the cigarette butts.
All right.
None of the hairs in the silencer, and I believe there were 3 hairs, which again, that seems suspicious. That somebody plucked off a few hairs from somewhere and shoved them into the silencer.
Yeah, this is weird.
Yeah. So, let me find my spot here. So it didn't match that. Okay. So none of the 3 hairs in the silencer matched the other. So they came from 3 different sources.
Oh, weird.
3 hairs from 3 different people. The hair attached to the letter came from someone else entirely. So now we're at 5 sources of DNA that do not match anybody, including Richard.
Okay.
So this tells police and investigators that someone is planting evidence to simply confuse the case.
Right.
That's where we're at.
Yep.
And then in the summer of 1999, investigators finally got a break. It was June 4th, 1999, when a fisherman named Matt McKay was walking about 15 to 20 feet off the road along a route that Richard said that he had driven in rural Lycoming County near Route 15 on the night that Miriam was murdered. As Matt walked along the bank of a stream in search of minnows, he tripped over something. Initially, he thought it was a piece of driftwood, but when he looked down, he realized that he was looking at a rifle. So once investigators were notified, they had no doubt in their minds that this was the murder weapon that killed Miriam.
Okay.
So the weapon was a rare Savage 23D rifle with the serial number wiped away. The gun was last sold in 1949 before records were ever kept. So it was loaded with a sawed-off barrel and stock. Now investigators had to see if the rifle could potentially be tied to Miriam and Richard. So Richard had a very long history with using guns. He was a hunter. By the fall of 1999, investigators were sure that it was Richard who had used his hunting skills to murder his wife. He was a good shot.
Yeah, why?
So we'll see.
Okay.
So 1 year after the rifle was found, investigators came across a photo of Richard's late grandfather. This is Joe Kowalski. He had been the one to actually teach Richard how to hunt. So after Joe's passing, he left many guns to Richard. So they're looking at this photo of Joe, and in one hand he's holding a groundhog, and the other he's holding a rifle. And the rifle he held looked just like the murder weapon. That ended up being, a huge break in this case.
Yeah.
So 2 months later, police found a pair of Reebok basketball shoes in the woods, which matched those of what the prints were found around the property of Miriam's house at the crime scene.
Size 14 basketball
Yes.
shoes.
They were very close to where the gun had been found, which were a quarter mile from the route that Richard said he took that night. The DA still felt that the evidence was still lacking in order to arrest Richard, who
does he wear... Oh, go ahead. Were you going to say what size he wears?
I will tell you what size he wears. It's not a 14.
Okay.
But again, somebody is planting evidence.
Yeah. So he could wear like a 10 or 12 and...
He wears a
14.
9.5.
Okay. As long as it's
So,
bigger. That's...
You just tie him pretty tight and clop your way through the snow. So 6 months after Miriam was murdered, Richard went on to marry his girlfriend, the one he was having an affair with throughout their marriage. In November of 2000, Richard relocated to Laredo, Texas for a job as a heart surgeon. He was very close to the Mexican border at this time. And he did say, he made the comment like, hey, if I was guilty, I wouldn't be just sitting here. I'd flee myself to Mexico.
And they're like, oh, believe me, we're watching you,
Yeah,
sir.
we're keeping an eye on you, mister. So when this job didn't pan out, Richard then moved to Spokane, Washington, where he applied for a position as a heart surgeon in that area. And the administrator of the practice, this is Kathy Austin, she received an anonymous package that was filled with newspaper articles and a letter that was warning anyone from hiring Richard. Basically, any place of employment where Richard was trying to seek employment, they were getting this same package.
Good for them.
Kathy turned Richard down for this position, so it worked.
Yeah.
Some believe that maybe they were sent by Miriam's family.
Good for
We're
them.
not entirely sure, but I support that.
Hell yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. Soon, Richard's wife divorced him. He seemed to fall off the grid in the world of heart surgery until he resurfaced in Spokane as a cosmetic surgeon at this point in time.
Okay.
In the meantime, Spokane police were tracking Richard both day and night at the request of Pennsylvania investigators. In December of 2022, investigators believe that they now had sufficient evidence in order to make an arrest. The plan was for a plainclothes detective to quietly make the arrest while Richard was at his office, but Richard must have somehow gotten tipped off of something because he was able to elude his pursuers. He was soon spotted again. He was followed onto the freeway, and as Richard entered downtown Spokane, he did pull over. And 4 years had passed at this point since Miriam had been killed when Richard was sent back to Williamsport and charged with Miriam's murder.
All right.
So during the trial, the prosecution presented that the motive for murder was clearly the fact that they were going through a messy divorce and Richard was at risk for losing both money and his son. And Richard felt that the evidence clearly pointed to someone else since the murderer wore a size 14 shoe and he wore a 9.5. It couldn't have been me.
That's impossible. There's no way you could put on a size 14 shoe.
Well, you know what? I wear a women's size 8 and I put on Mike's size 12 sometimes if I'm in the garage taking the garbage out and I don't feel like going back in the house and getting my shoes, and they work just fine.
Right.
Even though they're massive on my feet. So
I mean, credit where credit's due. At least he put some thought into the whole thing.
yeah, sure. So he also pointed out that the DNA on the cigarette butt did not match him, nor would he have left the silencer at the crime scene as evidence. But obviously, this was a calculated thing. This person left that silencer there to detract. So, we're on to you, Richard.
Yeah, he's not a dumb guy, but none of it makes sense.
And he also said that he would have never, ever written any anonymous letters in fear that he could have potentially left his DNA behind.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it is a risk.
Yeah.
So Richard also claimed to have never seen that gun before. However, when his Spokane home was searched, a manuscript was located on his computer that was titled Heart Shot. Murder of the Doctor's Wife is the name of this manuscript.
Ouch, that hurts. Man.
Oh my gosh, this is unbelievable. So the characters in the book, they didn't even have name changes. They had the same names as those in the real murder investigation.
Are you kidding?
I'm not kidding.
Oh my God.
And in this manuscript, Richard described his life with Miriam and also alluded to potential suspects of the murder or for the murder. He spoke about the killer and speculated about their thought process throughout this time that they were, planning this. The story describes that the killer had gone to Miriam's house multiple times. They were waiting for the right time. And it wasn't until their 7th night that they had come to the house that they actually went through with the murder.
So he's trying to almost write a story about it so that he's not guilty and be like, see, this is what I think might have happened. If it helps you, I'm not sure.
Or maybe it's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
He even described what the killer had done that night, steadied the rifle on the limb of the tree as Miriam spoke on the phone, having 10 minutes to flee the area, his car being parked down the street, and even discarding the cigarette butt in the snow before the shooting. So I find that very strange that he did this.
Well, I mean, it's not exactly what happened, because it was he's portraying a killer that's not him. It would be portraying himself, but he wasn't portraying himself, right?
Yeah, but still, it's
Right.
just strange.
Yeah.
So, of course, they question, why would you write this book from the killer's perspective?
I'm going to guess that he said, it helps him kind of process it and get through it and all that stuff.
He said he felt that it would generate more interest and widespread knowledge of the actual facts of the case. During the trial, the jury learned that Richard had been given the rifle through an inheritance in the summer before Miriam's murder.
Well, that's pretty damning.
So he's saying, he'd never seen that rifle before, and that's a blatant lie.
Ouch.
So Richard never took the stand during his 5-week trial. After 2.5 days of deliberation, the jury came back with their verdict. What do you think the verdict was?
Yeah, I mean, guilty. I think they're people are going to be like, he's a rich guy, we're going to get him, and he tried to get out of this, so guilty. Murder.
Richard Ellis was found guilty of first-degree murder.
Nailed it.
Investigators were thrilled since this point took 5 years in the making.
Yeah.
Richard was sentenced to life in prison.
Whew.
The investigators on this case acknowledged that Richard was an exceptionally intelligent man. I mean, he was.
Sure.
And likely smarter than any single individual that was investigating the case. However, as a team, he was not smarter than all of them together.
Right.
So they were able to get him despite all the things that he did.
Yeah.
Like all the planting of evidence.
Yeah, and there wasn't a lot to get him. That picture that his uncle had, but then the
picture of the grandpa.
Yeah. But then they did find he owned that exact gun.
Really, the finding of that picture with him, the grandpa holding the gun that looked just like the rifle.
Yeah. I think that was it. His undoing.
So 1 week after his conviction, Richard attempted suicide by gouging his wrists with a paperclip.
Oh, and you failed?
A paperclip. Huh.
Yeah. Well,
He has since made numerous appeals, all of which have been denied. Richie went on to live with relatives, and according to what my sources have said, he has no contact with his father. Again, he would have been 10 years old at this point. So there is no happy ending in this case, just as there never is when, both a father and a mother are gone and the kid is now left without either parent.
That sucks.
But, Miriam's family is very thankful that they have resolution and justice in this case. And Richie would be provided with opportunity for a bright future where he is both supported and loved.
Is he with Miriam's family? Mm-hmm. Okay.
And that is the sad story of the murder of Miriam Ellis.
Man. Oh, I'm glad they got the bastard.
Yeah. So it's interesting because, obviously no straight up DNA proved that he was involved.
Right.
None of it. The shoe print obviously didn't match his shoe print. It was the way that everything had been planted. The other weird thing that I found was that he so carelessly discarded of the gun and the shoes.
Yeah.
You would have thought he would have never let that gun be found.
I mean, the gun you would think would go to a river somewhere and throw it in there, right?
It sounds like he did not put it in the water. The guy was walking along the bank and literally tripped on it.
Well, I wonder if he threw it in and it kind of it doesn't float. Obviously, it's a gun, right? Although it's an old gun. Who knows if there's some wood on there? I don't know.
I don't know. All I know is if I was a vicious killer, I would have put the murder weapon somewhere far, where you would never find it.
Garbage dump or something.
Something.
Yeah.
I don't know what. Maybe in a deep river somewhere or a lake. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I truly think had they not found this rifle, he would have never been found guilty.
Yeah.
So I'm thankful that he was.
Tough cookies, Richard, you dumbass.
Yep.
You're as smart as you think you are. You're an idiot. So
you may be able to fix a person's heart, but I'm glad you didn't get away with murder.
And you're a failure.
Bitch.
A failure at that too, because then you started doing cosmetic surgery. So you're a loser, and enjoy your time in jail, and hopefully you rot in hell.
Yeah.
Right?
Basically.
Yeah. Well, hey, thanks for telling us and let us remember Miriam. So thank you. And Richie, hoping the best for that kid.
I hope so too. Because that's very sad.
Thank you so much for listening. We appreciate you. And if you want to hear even more episodes, there's over 40 bonus episodes available on Patreon or through Apple subscriptions.
Yeah, I'd say there's probably over 50.
Oh, that's a lot.
I'm going to go ahead and say over 50.
Okay. Well, okay. She's Allison saying over 50. So go ahead and subscribe us. We're just a little mom and pop podcast. I'm Pa.
And I'm Ma.
So, we're not like one of these big motherships. We depend on you and your generosity and appreciate you so much. So, it's, if you have a couple shekels, throw them over our way.
And we never take it for granted that you are all so supportive and that you're listening and giving us feedback and, becoming patrons or Apple subscribers. Not for a second do we ever take that for granted. So we just want to thank you guys. Thank you for being here. And until next time, bye.